Welcome back to the Jess and John podcast. I'm Jess.
And I'm John. Hello, JJ Nash.
We have a good episode for you. A really good interview with Astra Taylor with the Debt Collective about student loan debt. But before that, we have, just some news to catch up on, life to catch up on.
A little bit of news, some life in there too. What do we got?
So I was just at this conference for influencers, like content creators on the left. We don't say influencer anymore because I feel like that's a different category of people who are like, selling toothpaste.
Yeah, it's very like truffle aioli coated. I'm into that guy who's making fun of millennials right now, but it's probably projection because I'm like core millennial age.
Yeah, it's like, do you guys want to buy stuff? It's just like buying stuff centric. It's very consumer culture. Just making.
Ooh, what's up, guys?
Yeah, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Yeah, we don't do that. It's more like, hey everyone, have you noticed the government is trying to take away all of our rights? We're selling something different. But
Yikes.
it's weird. It's like a mix of like, liberals and the left. With the suspicion that we might have the same goal, but there was a moment, and it was where someone from Media Matters had their chart up, which I think we've all seen on social media, where it shows the right's influence in online news, online non-traditional media, and it's like the Joe Rogan podcast, Theo Vaughn. On the left side, the Young Turks and Hassan Piker and Pod Save America. And it just shows that like the right has way more real estate in online spaces than the left. But what's interesting is like Chapo Trap House wasn't on there, right? Because I think they were looking at YouTube followers and like they're mostly on Patreon. But it's this thing that I noticed that like we're trying to like fight the right and like have more online space than the right. But they include their far right people like Alex Jones and such and Charlie Kirk. But we don't like Democrats, not we, but like liberals don't include Chapo Trap House.
Yeah, what the hell? You're not getting our guerrilla podcast hidden in a network of underground tunnels out there throwing rocks at the Imperial State.
Totally. And so like, I don't know, they had a lot of good speakers there. Like I was telling John, I'm so impressed with Raphael Warnock.
Speak on that. I'm curious because I'll be honest, I did not go to this conference. I have not heard Raphael Warnock talk, but I'm naturally like squinty eye, skeptical in his general direction. So what was up?
Yeah, it's like it's one of those things where maybe he's more like middle of the road than me on a lot of issues, but man, the dude can speak. He's a pastor, right? Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock, which is just a crazy title. When they introduced him, I was like, Reverend Senator. It sounds like sci-fi almost for some reason.
Rev.
But I didn't really know what to expect, but he quickly went from like, hi everyone, like you're all content creators, and then I was like, oh, we are in church, like he's giving a sermon right now. And he talked about how when you wake up in the morning, sometimes even though you got good sleep and you're taking care of your body, right, you weren't out drinking the night before or something, but you just feel off, like something's off. And he was like, you have to shake that off and you have to go about your day and like find the light and spread light and find light in darkness. Because we live in dark times right now, and it feels all over the country like just something is off. That like feeling when you wake up and you're not all there. And he just speaks to like a deep human experience, which is what I appreciate listening to him talk. And something he said, which it wasn't the first time I had heard it, but it was something I've only ever heard like in person. Like I don't think this idea is represented well online, but I first heard it on John Green's book tour, where he talked about we actually live in really unprecedented times. People are saying, oh, we live in such unprecedented times. I hate living in the unprecedented times. And actually, our rights have been under attack before. And we've been in positions where racial injustice was worse than it is now. And Raphael Warnock talked about that as well. And what did we do in those times? Citizens stood up for what was right. And he reminded everyone that Martin Luther King Jr. was not an elected official. He was a private citizen who just chose to stand up for what he believed in. And when he tried to get the Civil Rights Act passed, he went to the president who said, I just don't have the power to get something like that done right now. And he said, well, I better go out and find him some. And went out and like had people marching. And I think that's really interesting as a point to make to the public right now, that like anyone can take action to change this. And as someone who's watching Andor, the Star Wars series,
Oh no.
the rebellions are built on hope, and it's a lot of like little actions you take that all come together to sort of form a rebellion or movement. So he didn't talk about that. That's all me.
Nice. Still have not watched Star Wars. Really uh need to do this to continue in this chair as a co-host of the Jess and John pod. One
I'm
day it will
making it
happen.
insufferable.
I think, yeah, no, I think what you're speaking to is really important. Like for me, we really need moral leaders in the moment. We need people who are kind of like conjuring that hope up, and we need them to, be demonstrating what's always been true. Like politics have, especially recently over the last couple of decades, just become such like everything else, something we consume, something that we watch, and we're like, holy shit, I can't believe this is happening to us, rather than seeing it as something that we have agency over to participate in, and slam the brakes on all the bad stuff that's happening right now and build something better. I think we need moral voices to speak to that. Pastors, very good at doing this. For me personally, William J. Barber is excellent, an excellent moral voice that kind of speaks to that in the poor people's movement. And I think what I find myself wanting is people in elected office. We have a lot of people who can give speeches. We need more of them who can not only put out that moral call, but also back it up in the way that they vote. I mean, I think where I get my skepticism towards most people who are elected right now is like, okay, if you can give a speech like Cory Booker can, then what kind of voting record is that married to right now? And I think a lot of times I just see an unnecessary trimming of sails in the voting records of a lot of these people that don't necessarily match the words that they're so great at putting out. But when somebody comes through and actually, hits it on the head, it's like you can see it in the response to the public consuming this, such a thirst for leadership in this moment, because I think we've been without it for so long, and that is even more stark as things become worse and worse and worse, as we have like every day brings you more unbelievable headlines, right? And it just makes it so clear when you have a lack of leadership on the other side. So anywhere that's coming from, I'm definitely for. And we're all hoping for a new crop of leaders that can deliver a working class agenda that many folks are asking for right now.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's interesting how we have compromises being made all over the political spectrum. And like, I think about this so much, but uh, someone who is advocating for the working class, maybe in, I don't know, the Midwest or anywhere, the Northwest of the United States too, where you've got a base and a constituency of primarily white folks and like not a ton of immigrants. There's a kind of like working class narrative that maybe is a more extreme version of economic populism that really works. And then like I think about Atlanta and like where Raphael Warnock is from, and you might be able to take a more staunch stance on racial injustice and racial issues, where in the Midwest, most of your base might be turned off by that because they're afraid of Black power, because they think that means the equivalent of white power, but just Black people are doing it, which is why they're afraid of it, because of how white power has been used to oppress people. Whereas, like, we know and I live in the Midwest, that like when people say Black Power, they're like, can we have some as well? Can we have some rights? Can we have representation? And so I don't feel threatened by that at all. I don't feel threatened by equality. I don't feel threatened by Black Power, but a lot of people in the Midwest who didn't grow up around Black people might be afraid of that. And so you can't run on that. And so I think a lot about the kind of compromises that are made. But as long as like you have one radical issue that you're fighting for and you're speaking on that all the time, like that's kind of what I like in politics these days. Is I like when people are willing to fight for extreme and radical change because I think that's what's necessary in our country. And I kind of understand the compromises some people make. And I think on the left, we want some people to be everything. Um, and I'm starting to come around and be less of an insufferable leftist where I'm mad when someone doesn't agree with me on everything. And so I think maybe Raphael Warnock changed that in me this week. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I mean, for me, I just go like a really broad lens of like who is on my side. To me, and this might be simple, but it's what I choose to stick with given the distribution of money and power here. It's just like, are you with billionaires? Or are you not with billionaires? It's like, I am
Mm.
willing to side with someone who has, double digit $1 million, just because when you look at the extremely radical distribution of wealth in this country, I mean, it's one of those things that's hanging over our heads all the time, but we're just bad at perceiving really large numbers. But when you really look at any chart of just who has the money in this country, it becomes clear that there are really two sides. It's like billionaires or not billionaires. And I am willing to kind of draw the line there and start there, because we're a long way away from living in a world where billionaires no longer have the power to control every issue that we talk about on this podcast. And I'm down to keep it with like, hey, let's deal with that first, and then we'll talk about the divisions that, uh, make some people insufferable on the left, for example. But I'm willing to cast a wide net and keep it at that for now.
Yeah, I will say that when someone picks like a cultural issue that doesn't directly have to deal with someone's survival as their main political thing, and they're radical about that, that is not what I mean by what I said. I feel like as long as you have one radical position, it has to address the problem of survival, which is being made more difficult specifically by the ruling
Yeah.
class and billionaires. And they do it in all kinds of ways. But yeah, totally. I think there was one moment in the conference where I was kind of like, why the fuck is no one talking about working class issues? Like, this is precisely the problem. And then there was a panel, and God, she works for Media Matters. I know her name, Abby, maybe. Um, and she was talking about, she just said, well, I think the biggest thing we're facing right now, and I'll just say it, is like fuck the rich,
Yeah.
is the rich, and we need to center like working class issues and making sure people have good schools, food on the table, affordable rent, good jobs, protections. And I was like, yeah, okay. So there are people who get this and who are centering this, but there was almost like a hush that came over the room when she said it. And I have all these moments where I just feel like I'm never gonna be a right winger, right? And when you say shit like this, people are always like, "Oh, she's gonna grift to the right." Absolutely not. But like, there are times where I feel really lonely on the left when someone says that thing, which is so understood among the majority of the country, that like the ruling class is fucking over the working class. And some people, point to Democrats as the elites and the problem. And while I think like a lot of it is misled, there is a point there. Like I do kind of like nod along when they say that because it's true. And it's the main problem I have with the Democratic Party. But I don't think like the right's vision is the correct one, which is why I'm not following it. But I do feel lonely when there's a hush over the room and not cheers when people are saying "fuck the rich."
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah,
Guys, like we're not we're not talking about like the small business owners here. We're talking about people who can, said it on the show before, but like who do we mean when we say the rich? I mean, who I mean when I say fuck the rich is people who are going to get bailed out by the federal government, because they're too big to fail. Who could call the Treasury Secretary, who could move markets with their personal investment decisions, Part of updating our politics to match a moment right now is realizing that rich does not mean the guy with a nice car or a 3-car garage who's living in the suburbs. Um, it is a small elite class of people who you'll never meet out in public because they're kind of stateless and insulated from the public because they know it's a risk to show up in public
Mm-hmm.
anymore, really, because it's a reflection of how much power they have, not just over this government, but I mean, really all over the world. You look at someone like Elon Musk, he's handing out $1 million checks in Wisconsin, but he's going over to Germany and supporting the AFD over there. This group of rich people that we're talking about is not just unique to our country, but they're, um, influencing politics to benefit themselves the world over. That's who we're talking about. And it's
Mm-hmm.
why I think there should be cheers when you say fuck the rich at these parties.
Yeah, totally. And I was just kind of thinking about it, like, yeah, a lot of these people have a large following now. Um, but I hope honestly that they're irrelevant in a year, if I'm being totally honest. Like I was looking around the room and I was like, damn, a lot of these people are just repeating DNC talking points
Yeah, man.
and taking photos with Hakeem Jeffries.
Boo.
And I don't see that as the future of the Democratic Party. And it was good that one of the most popular content creators, Neme, was talking about how she loves what David Hogg's been saying. And I think that's good. And I also, at one point, called David Hogg David Miles Hogg, and I was conflating Ian Miles Chong with
Nice.
David Miles Hogg. But
Live on tape.
yeah, yep, I did that, and I repeated it into a microphone. Don't know why, but now you guys know that about me. But yeah, I think that it's weird being in that room, and I was just kind of like, man, I hope this looks differently, and I think it will because people are starting to see that that narrative doesn't work, that it's not representative of the American public, even though there's this like devoted group of people that might be like hundreds of thousands of people big, maybe a couple million people big, that love the Democratic Party and love those
Mm-hmm.
talking points. But when that's not a constituency that can win elections, should that be the national party's agenda? Maybe not. Should that be their message? Maybe not. But maybe these people do well online because that base likes hearing what they like to hear. And it's just, we have to get more strategic. And I think that we're going to realize that the following of people on the left is larger when it's economic populist content. The Young Turks, even though they've gone in a different direction lately, they were the biggest bubble, right, in left wing media on that chart. And so a lot of those followers came during the Bernie movement, and we have to be really honest about what's popular and what's not. And I was in that room and happy to be invited, but also hoping it would look different.
Yeah, the political winds are shifting. And I just, from anecdotal stuff, I go out and produce videos for More Perfect Union. I've said it many times, but you can just feel when your job is to go out there and to talk to people, you can feel that politics is changing under our feet. Donald Trump did what he did to one of our major American political parties, but now the base of the other um, are shifting in ways that I think if we had new leadership, um, it's possible out there. There's like an untapped market within the base of Democratic voters um, for supporting things that we don't know how far people will go yet because we have this. The only leaders that we have who are really speaking to that base are known quantities. And of course, there's Bernie and AOC on one side, but like the core leadership that's speaking to the Democratic base right now are people like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, almost like clownish in their ways to use media and to relate to the public. And I think what they're covering up is an appetite among the people who are traditionally their base for things that are very different. People come up to me all the time who are um, nice suburban middle class people who were Hillary voters and were skeptical of Bernie. They're now coming to Bernie rallies and they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about Luigi Mangione. I mean, when that is happening, you can bet that a massive group of people is up for something new. But we don't have a completely new crop of leaders that are speaking to everything that they would be willing to support. But I can feel that right now. And I'm hoping that those leaders emerge and that people rediscover that politics isn't something just to consume, but it's something you can actively participate in. This is all to say that the moment feels like it could shift significantly. So
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean there was a lot of people there that came up to me and they're like, "Oh, I love your videos, like, whatever. And I love what you and John are doing because you're talking to people that are outside of the major cities and that's your entire focus and that's so necessary and needed." And I didn't even like think about that. It just feels like an impulse to do that because that's the America I love. Like I love farmers. I love alternative
hell yeah.
music. I love driving on dirt roads. It's just the part of America that I love, and those are the people that I like and want to talk to. And so, shout out to, I don't remember who said that, but whoever you are, thank you and thanks for listening. But there is this kind of weird thing of like, we don't need to talk to people who are different, and the people who live in the mountains and who live in the country are people who deserve to suffer under Trump because they voted for him, not realizing only like 50% of the country even votes. So no, he won a plurality of the voting population, which is not a majority at all. And so yeah, it's weird being in a room of people who frequently wish ill on people that I love and where my family lives. And so I think, that animosity, we got to get over it. And Pete Buttigieg, who's been going on podcasts that, have pissed some people off. Why are you platforming these right wing leaning comedians and stuff? And so he was asked about that on stage. And I think he gave a really good answer. I actually got a video of it. So we're going to play it for you guys.
First of all, my job as a figure in politics is to persuade. And by definition, there's no moving people to where they already are. You can't lead somebody to where they already are. So you got to find people who aren't there and try to attract and pull them, guide them, push them to where you believe we all need to be. And that process of encounter, that process of dialogue, I think is critically important. And whether that's going on Fox News or going on Flagrant. By the way, there are limits for this. I'm not going to do Tucker. But within certain limits, and I draw those limits maybe with a wider circle than most politicians do, I think it's really important to get there. Because how can I blame somebody for not embracing the message that I believe in if they've literally never even heard it? And how can I assume they've heard it in today's media environment? Look, I grew up in a time when there was some controversy, and you learned about it from a TV story. And you would see a liberal politician talking about it, and then you'd see a conservative politician talking about it. Sometimes seeing both sides would make me feel what I already believed even more strongly and think of my own argument for what I would say to the conservative. Other times, like hearing both sides, made me stop and reconsider some of what I believe in. The point is, you would think about it. And now, one of the things that the algorithm does is it sorts almost everything we get into 3 buckets. Here's this person I already support looking good. Here's this person I already dislike doing something disagreeable. And it's relative, which is here's this somebody I already dislike looking foolish. Right? That's pretty much it. And so finding ways to get across that, even if that means spending like 3 hours in an environment that's like politically maybe not exactly your native turf, I think is wildly important. And I think we need more of that. We need that. I know there's a worry about platform. And, if this was, if I was offering an invitation for somebody I think best embodied like an inclusive dialogue, that's probably not who I would choose. But we've got to be cross-cutting platforms, or else we're just going to get pushed more and more into our little corners. Nobody's persuading anybody, and nothing moves.
That's a great point. And Pete said, I'm not Gavin, don't get it twisted.
That was amazing. He like awkwardly takes a sip of water. He did not want to address the Gavin Newsom comment at all.
I really like the running awkward sips of water that happen in politics. For our viewing listeners, Jessica is demonstrating how to properly drink water while talking politics. And for our audio listeners, you can't even tell because it was a flawless sip of water there. Jessica, you took this. What's your thoughts being in the room?
It's an important thing to say to that specific room of people for a lot of what I've already just said on this podcast, but because when he went on Flagrant, it was so effective. Those clips were everywhere. And he talks about articulating a positive vision for the world a lot, and he does that. And one of the clips that I saw that went the most viral, which might just be my algorithm, but it's good that it went viral coming out of a podcast that's listening base is like probably some men in the manosphere and a lot of people on the right, and probably a lot of people who don't pay attention to politics, where he said, I want to live in a country where I can wake up with my family and make breakfast, and the groceries will have been affordable. And the gas I put in my car to take my kid to school and to drive myself to work was affordable. Um, I can afford my car. I have a day at work where I'm paid well and treated with respect. And I come home to that same house and enjoy time with my family. And maybe we can go for a walk. Maybe we can enjoy public transit. And he really paints a picture of quite a nice life. And a lot of the barriers of affordability in the country are why people voted for Trump. And talking about the sort of left vision for a future that Pete has made people in the room, like Andrew, the main comedian guy on the podcast, was like, wow, that sounds really nice. Like I would like that. I would vote for that, something along those lines. And so I think he really means the shit that he says right there. And I agree with him about the platforming thing. That's been made such an issue. But as someone who was on a debate show with the right, where I literally showed up and argued with them every day and like tried to present an alternative view, like I think it's infinitely important. I've gotten messages about people who have used my arguments and my sentiments to change their family's point of view. So I
Yeah.
agree. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think the point of like you have to talk to voters wherever they are. So if you got to go, Bernie goes on Fox News, Pete goes on Fox News. I don't have any problem with people going on to channels that have right wing, channels that have right wing perspectives, but are getting massive audiences. I don't have a problem with people going on to Joe Rogan and tapping into that audience. I think it's just important what you say when you get there. Because for me, Pete Buttigieg, and for the record, JJ Nash, I am no Pete Buttigieg fan, but I think he's a very skilled communicator. He's very good at painting that vision that I think a lot of people have in their head that's just not articulated. They're like, hey man, I want to have cheap gas. I want to be able to cook a meal and not go bankrupt. I want to know that we're like living in a country where a bunch of boogeymen aren't like trying their best and succeeding to like fuck up what I have going here. And I think characters like Pete are very good at kind of painting that vision. But what I'm looking for also is to reflect the reality that we live in that is standing in the way of that vision, because we have private equity companies and billionaires and people who run them who are buying up the supply chain of groceries and making them more expensive. They're buying up the supply chains of everything, of banking, of healthcare, of mortgages. It's this consolidation of power. And I think if you're wanting to be elected and you're painting a vision and you're asking people to trust you to address this, then yeah, go on Joe Rogan, go on Fox News, but also talk about what you're going to do to break the intense power that is concentrated in the hands of a few people right now. I think we get that from folks like Bernie. I think I don't hear that as often from folks like Pete, somebody who's worked in the spreadsheet industry for a while. And I think that's the kind of communication that should be going directly to the viewers of Fox News, because from going out and working with that population in my own job, people aren't as dumb as you think, right? They can sense that there is a concentration of power. And I think when you spell out who is standing in the way of cheap gas and who's standing in the way of cheap groceries and all the rest, people know that BlackRock and Vanguard and the moves of moneyed interest have something to do with it, and we need leaders to communicate a real vision for how they're going to shift the balance of power in this country back to where we always intended it to be, of, by, and for the people, you know. And I'm looking for that in our political communicators. And yes, they should go on and talk directly to conservative audiences. End of rant for me. Oop, you're muted.
No. Okay, speaking of that, John, there's a guy I know who does a lot of like really good content that I think like reaches across the political aisle in an effective way.
Yeah.
And he's nominated for an Emmy.
Get the hell out of town. Who is this?
So John, I'm embarrassing John, but I really want to talk about this next because you were just talking about doing this and you effectively do this. And this is the second Emmy nomination. This is the second Nami you've got.
I always do that. I'm like, I was nominated. Wait, I was emanated for a Nami. And people are like, they're giving these things out to idiots? What's wrong? Well, how is this possible?
Okay, so what are you emanated for?
I've been emanated for another Nami. Yes, it's round 2. I am flipping both sides of my mullet right now. Baby. Shout out to, by the way, this was for, I'm excited on multiple fronts. Of course, More Perfect Union is the organization that's nominated. They make this work possible. And I do want to shout out another friend too, Austin Freerick, who was emanated for a Nami with More Perfect Union on a piece that he did about consolidation in the agriculture industry. He took a real deep look at Tyson Foods. You should go to More Perfect Union and watch that piece. The piece that I was nominated for was the piece we did on Elliott County, Kentucky. It's the only county in America that voted for Democrats for 144 years straight before a dramatic flip to Donald Trump, while at the same time also voting for a Democratic governor. So it was a politically really unique county. I got to shout out the team that made it too. Nehemiah Stark, Josh Hirschfeld-Crowan, Meg Hirschlein, Court Fuller, Josh Miller-Lewis, Faz, everybody at More Perfect Union. But really, you know, what I want to say here, this piece and every other piece that we do is kind of to show the possibility of working class solidarity in the places where you least expect it. So we go out and we ask Trump voters how they really feel. And we're not going for 30-second sound bites on what is in the news, or we're not asking them to fall into the typical left-right buckets here. We're saying, like, give us your big thoughts on who has power in this country, what that means for you personally, and how you would change it if you were president. Okay. And if you open this up and you make it, and you bring the conversation out of the left-right divide, you find the possibility for economic populism, is a fancy word to put it, for solidarity, for working class people of all stripes to come together. Because when you give them the mic, people know whether you're voting for Donald Trump or you're voting for any Democrat, people will tell you our healthcare system is insane. Our college situation is also insane. Like your interview, which we're about to jump to here with Astra Taylor, is a perfect rundown of yet another example of something that smaller, less wealthy countries provide to their citizens for free. We're talking about higher education in this case, but you could name any number of other public services. All of these other countries are able to do what the richest country on earth is not able to do. And when you're out there talking to Trump supporters about, you know, broad senses of who has power, they know it's not them. They don't like it. It's just that they're going for a guy who is telling a really compelling lie about the reasons why folks don't have power. You know, Donald Trump is out here constantly saying it's not the billionaires who control these systems. You should be blaming the immigrants or people who are different than you or people with radical agendas. We try to break out of that in every single one of these More Perfect Union videos. Elliott County, that was nominated, emanated for a Nami, is just a great example to focus on Trump specifically and what people really feel in a unique county in Appalachia and Eastern Kentucky that on the one hand is electing Democratic governors and on the other hand, switching to Donald Trump. So go give it a watch. Super grateful for the outlet and the team. And hopefully the mortal enemy, Mariana Rivera, who works for a number of different news outlets, she does great work, but she's always winning these things. And hopefully we prevail this time. Muted, Jess.
I keep trying to mute so I don't interrupt, and then I interrupt by not being on mute.
Oh, I invite the interruption, please.
So your work is the first place that I saw anyone say it's okay to admit that you were lied to by Trump. And now that's being used everywhere. How does it feel to have started this really effective trend, John, as a journalist?
That's the other thing. It doesn't feel special at all because it really isn't. We're just going out and talking to people like you would to your friends or your relatives. And I think why people look at our work and they say, oh my gosh, something unique is happening here. This guy's really onto something. It's just because we don't see normal conversations represented in political media anymore. We are seeing, the pressures of algorithms and advertisers make our conversation about politics insanely stupid. And, at this outlet, we're just able to get out of those talking points and have a wide-ranging conversation with people that, airs in these 15-minute short documentaries, but it's a reminder that, one of the things that's operating all the time, whether we realize it or not, is these echo chambers. We get sucked into our own side and we start to think things that we start to think about people in like broad terms, right? Oh, Trump supporters, they all believe this. And then Trump supporters are thinking like, oh, anybody who votes for Democrats has got horns under their hat, right? But those are all things that are reinforced by the way that our media operates. And we're just kind of lucky enough to be able to go out and have conversations like you would and represent those in media. That's not possible, on CNN or a major outlet anymore. So I don't think it's anything that's special. It's just showing political conversations, how they unfold between ordinary people.
This episode's really about opening up the echo chamber. We just keep coming back to this. We talk about it in the Astra Taylor interview at the end as well. I think an echo chamber maybe that needs to be open up is the one in or surrounding Israel, Gaza. So moving to this is intense. This week news came out that the finance minister of Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, made a statement Tuesday. He said within a year we'll be able to declare victory in Gaza. Gaza will be entirely destroyed. Civilians will be sent to the south to a humanitarian zone without Hamas or terrorism, and from there they will start to leave in great numbers to third countries. Israel does not intend to withdraw from territories the IDF captures, not even as a part of a deal to release hostages. So just saying the quiet part out loud on Israel.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, I don't know if you're listening to this and you have the same algorithm that I do, but I just think, when you see the destruction, it's impossible for me to conclude anything other than what this is. It is a genocide. It is an ethnic cleansing by a right-wing government, and I understand, when I'm talking to my parents about this or, people in majority white conservative Appalachia, it's not, people are scared of admitting any wrongdoing by a government that is associated with Jewish people, because obviously they had the biggest genocidal trauma that we can think of in recent memory. But it's important to separate this out. Nobody's a monolith, and that includes Jewish people. And I've been educated myself by so many Jewish people who are against what is happening and have been against it from the jump. And this is not just a small number of people. These are millions and millions of Jewish people, just calling it for what it is. When you see the scale of destruction, when you see right-wing ministers like this admitting plans to, step by step ethnically cleanse this strip of land, Gaza, you have to call it out for what it is. And what was really disturbing about this recent news is the quote that was praising the Biden administration. We heard all throughout the election that they're working tirelessly for a ceasefire. And here we have members of the right-wing Israeli government saying, hey, all of the things that we're doing here, all of the pictures that you see in your timeline, these would not be possible without the support of the American government that included the Democratic Party on this. So that it was very disturbing to me. And obviously we need to end this, and we need people to speak out, when they're seeking to represent us, especially from the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Last thing I'm going to say about Star Wars this episode, because we're about to go to the Astra Taylor interview, is that Andor, the series that's being made by Disney Plus, Tony Gilroy, who's just a genius and a visionary, and anyone on the left should be watching this. People on the right are watching this and having a meltdown because they wanted to believe that the Empire was the good guys for some reason, and this wasn't about America or a good allegory for it, even though George Lucas fucking said the Empire was the US and it was about the Vietnam War. It doesn't matter. So the allegory fits a lot of struggles for justice and freedom of working peoples and oppressed peoples. But this last 3 series drop that came out Tuesday, the genocide of the Gorman people, is one of the most important pieces of media that has come out in the last 10 years. And if you've been following what's happening in Israel, Gaza, it is just insane. Like, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. It's so good. You have to watch it. I can't give away spoilers because I want people to watch it and enjoy it for themselves, but it is such like a prescient, like almost too much, but like they do such a good job executing it that it's not so on the nose that you're like, well, this is obviously about Israel Gaza right now. But yeah, you should watch it. And then some fucking idiots on Reddit were like, this is obviously about January 6th and the Gormans are like the Trump supporters fighting for freedom from oppression. And it's like, no, I don't think so. Not even a little bit. But just really watch it. Even if you watch nothing else, the 3-episode drop from Tuesday.
Yeah. This goes back to my long-running lack of Star Wars specific knowledge that comes from not watching it. Maybe I will take the advice of this podcast, but just in broad strokes here, I think when we're talking about there really being two sides, the very, very powerful people that have their interests that are kind of running the world and making decisions and controlling governments. And then there's everybody else, who is going to work and trying to survive. That's the world over, that's the world over. So it's really everybody who is out of power versus everybody who is in power right now, because it's not like the right-wing movements are just something unique to America. We're seeing them sweep liberal democracies all across the world. So we have a lot of people who are on our side, but not within our borders.
Yeah, we're going to turn to this really good conversation with Astra Taylor, who's with the Debt Collective and thinks a ton about how student loan debt and just debt affects working people and exacerbates the divide in our society. And we really got into it. It's a really good interview. So look forward to that. Here it is. All right, so Astra, let's talk about at first, just who you are. Who is Astra Taylor? What's your background? What do you do?
I'm a writer. I write books about politics and philosophy and ideas, and sometimes I make movies, documentaries about the same topics. But for the last 10 years, I have been organizing with a group I helped found called the Debt Collective, which is an experimental union of debtors. And we've really led the charge on the fight for student debt cancellation, though we organize around medical debt and healthcare for all and rent debt and housing for all. But student debt work is what we're most known for.
Now, the news today about Trump's changes to sort of his approach to economic populism. At first, he was talking about, and it wasn't even him. It was, Howard Lutnick would say this and a lot of people surrounding him, talking about cutting taxes for earners under $200,000 a year, saying that all these tariffs are going to fund that and make that possible. Now we're seeing, coming out of the reporting around his talks with Speaker Mike Johnson, that there may be a new tax bracket that he's pushing for. Individuals making 2.5 or 5 million jointly would go to 39.6%. What do you make of this potential tax hike on millionaires? Do you think it's real? And what do you think about, Trump's economic populism?
First off, I would say it's not the law of the land yet, so I'm not counting any tax hike chickens. And also, I mean, there's always been, populist rhetoric as part of the Trump phenomenon, right? I mean, so that doesn't surprise me. I guess one thing, I take some issue with the way it's being framed as like Trump proposes tax hikes on millionaires. This is actually him not renewing one aspect of his 2017 tax bill, and therefore allowing the tax rate on earners over, as you said, $2.5 million, letting it go up from 37% to 39.6%. So this is not, this is kind of a reversion to something that was in place that he changed. So, I kind of object to the framing. And I think what it does show is that taxing the rich is popular. And it's like newsflash, and that they're having to face some of the reality of the Trumponomics, right? Like that the math is not mathing in ways that the tariffs aren't doing what they thought they would do, and they're improvising. But they're not; these tax hikes aren't in place, and I think they're not as extreme as they're being framed, at least according to the headlines. But I do think what it tells people on our side of the political spectrum is it's just a reminder that this is the kind of stuff that speaks to the American people writ large, right? I mean, even if it doesn't stick, even if it doesn't become policy, it'll be in the ether that Trump was willing to take on the millionaires, right? Because he knows that that's good memeing. That's a good narrative to be out there, even if everything he's doing with his entire budget is sabotaging the well-being of the working and middle class,
Right, we're seeing proposed cuts to Medicaid, education, SNAP, programs that people really rely on. And in the name of government efficiency, as crazy as that is, we're seeing cuts to the IRS, which means we're not going to be able to enforce the tax code that's already in place in terms of corporate taxes. And we'll see more corporate tax fraud because it's unenforceable. Simultaneously, we're seeing on working people, middle class people with college degrees, facing the looming threat of having their wages garnished for the money that they owe on their student loans, and potentially having those loans go into collections. So it's this sort of pass for the ruling class when regular working people are gonna have their purse strings tightened, not just because of this, but also the tariffs and everything else compounding that are the direct result of Trump's actions. So should working people on the student loan front be afraid of what's been reported? What do you make of the reporting that wages are going to be garnished and collections? Anyone in default is going to have their loans go to collections.
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, again, going back to the Trump tax cut thing, I mean, I was making a film called What is Democracy and writing a book on democracy in 2015 when Trump was running. And so I went to a bunch of Trump rallies, and that economic populism was always there, right? It was, it was almost like being back at Occupy Wall Street. There were literally like these jumbotrons with anti-hedge fund messages, and then he'd rail against the war in Iraq, and then throw in his anti-immigrant racist spiel, so the fact that we're still kind of surprised when he talks like that, we being liberals, I guess, more broadly, is part of what we need to get over, because this is, those making those noises is a major part of his appeal. But what is going on under the surface, right, is incredibly punitive and harmful to working class and middle class people. And, the stuff that's going to happen with student loans absolutely proves that. So There've been sort of two announcements. One is the messaging that Education Secretary Linda McMahon has been doing. Let's not forget that this is a billionaire who made her career, working in the entertainment industry and wrestling, right? So she knows very little about education policy. Nevertheless, she's out there on social media saying student loans can't be forgiven, it's just a burden on taxpayers. And so what the Trump administration are going to do is ramp up the cruelest, most punitive, punishing aspects of the debt collection machine. So they are turning on the federal government's collection apparatus, and the federal government has extraordinary abilities to collect. Unlike regular debt collectors, they can do a lot to ruin your life. The government can not only tank your credit score, which makes it hard to, rent an apartment or borrow at, fair rates, sometimes to get a job. They can garnish your wages, which they are saying they're going to start doing, garnish your Social Security, garnish your tax returns. People don't realize this, but the fastest growing cohort of student debtors are older people over 60. So we know from data, this is going to plunge thousands of seniors into poverty. People who have student debt who are garnished because they're in default also tend to be folks who didn't get their degree, probably because they couldn't manage to work 3 jobs and study at the same time. So a huge number, over 40% of student debtors actually don't have the benefit of a college degree. They just have the debt. Those are the kind of folks who are going to see their wages garnished. Also, mostly disproportionately Black and brown student borrowers. So why are they doing this? They're doing this incredibly painful thing that, by the way, cost the government a ton of money because it came in some years. For example, 2017, the government spent $700 million paying debt collectors to squeeze money from folks who didn't have the money to pay, right? I mean, this is also, you end up paying an extraordinary amount to extract money from folks who just don't have it, right? Like it's a ridiculous example of waste, fraud, and abuse in my mind. So they're going to pay these predatory debt collectors to inflict this harm. And then they're going to kind of cook the books, do some funny Enron math and say, hey, look at all this money we're saving so that we can justify tax cuts and we can justify, the bigger Trump agenda. So that's the collection stuff is official as of May 5th. But then they're also the Republicans in Congress, with the backing, the approval of the Trump administration, are proposing a massive overhaul of the student loan system in the reconciliation bill. So this is passed committee. Obviously, the reconciliation hasn't happened, but it is a rather apocalyptic scenario if you read the details. And again, this is all about fudging the numbers and punishing student borrowers, so poor folks, because they're not punishing people who don't have to borrow to go to school, rich people who can pay, right, whose parents are paying for them. And also, they're doing it in such a way that will also hurt the schools themselves too. So they're kind of getting a twofer, like they're destroying higher education and destroying the lives of student borrowers. So we should also really be paying attention to what's in reconciliation.
Yeah, it really feels insane to be living under an administration where I'm able to criticize it because I took out student loans to be able to go to school. It was like my only way to be socially mobile was to go into a massive amount of debt. And that's a crazy facet of supposedly one of the greatest economies in the world. I mean, what do you just make of the cost of education and that impact on the economy?
I mean, again, waste, fraud, and abuse, like we can almost abuse it as a framework, but it's such an inefficient system. I mean, I think the left talks a lot about how much more efficient it would be to have Medicare for all, right? I mean, the United States spends a huge amount on private insurance and the administrators that it takes to run, private insurance to get access to healthcare, and not to mention the entire debt collection apparatus that gets funded. If you have a public healthcare system, all of that, sort of extraneous stuff goes away, and you end up spending money more efficiently on the things that people need to be well. Education is similar, right? Like we fund education in a really convoluted way. The public purse, the federal government, issues student loans and secures them, right? Provides borrowers with some modicum of protection and somewhat affordable rates and repayment plans and forgiveness plans. And that's how we fund education. And that is I won't go into the deep history, but it is something that has deep roots, goes back initially to the GI Bill. It wasn't loans then, but during the GI Bill period after World War II, it was about money following the individual student. The government spent a huge amount on the GI Bill, most of it going to education. It's like more expensive than the Marshall Plan, but the money followed the individual student. Why? Because of racism. Because the government didn't want to just fund education as a public good and let Black folks and women and working class people go to college. Instead, it perpetuated pre-existing social inequalities that sort of Dixiecrats and Southern power brokers didn't want to see broken down. And so we've kept that method of money following the student via the student loan system. And so it's incredibly inefficient. And what would be more efficient and more just would be fully funding free public education for everybody. And by that, I mean free as in cost, free as in freedom, like freedom to study what you want without worrying about having to mortgage your future, free as in like having free speech on campus. But we're moving dramatically in the opposite direction. I mean, what this reconciliation bill will do is actually undermine, and this is ironic, like I've spent the last 10 years fighting for the abolition of student loans, and now I'm going, the student loan system is going to get even worse because they're getting rid of, they will undermine the federal subsidized student loan program, cap the amount of loans people can access through these subsidized federal programs. Why? Because it will reopen the markets to Wall Street, right? So it will push working class people who can't borrow on fair terms out of the lending system as it exists, open up a whole new field for lending profiteers, and also because of something they like to call risk sharing, which is saying that colleges where the students have trouble paying their debts will now have to pay because of that, that those schools will also be punished. So anyway, the point is that public higher education, as problematic as it was, is going to be, further decimated by this next round of lawmaking.
Yeah, and Trump has really been at the center of this movement to have a public that has a really loose relationship with the truth, right? Anything that's disfavorable to him or his movement or what he believes in is fake news. And his followers love him and believe this and then go on to think, well, if I don't like it, it must be fake news as well. And that loose relationship with the truth maybe could be combated with education, which it seems he's intentionally making more scarce. And this is something that the right has done time and again in America. Roger Freeman, who was the advisor to Ronald Reagan, said in the 70s, we're in danger of producing an educated proletariat. That's dynamite. We have to be selective about who we allow to go through higher education. If not, we'll have a large number of highly trained and unemployed people. And it's kind of this idea that we need to have this underclass, this working class, be working for corporations, dependent on corporations for their livelihood. We can't have them out there thinking. That's ridiculous. Maybe they'll question the systems that oppress them. And so this feels really obvious, but what would you say to someone who supported Trump and maybe didn't have a chance to go to college, who feels sort of vindicated that these people are going to have to pay their student loans because they didn't have the same opportunity?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on what you just said, because I think what you said actually, so you touched on the history of student debt and student lending, and we do have to, the moment when it became a sort of mass phenomenon was during Reagan's tenure as governor in California, when people were flooding into the college system. It was a free public system, and they were protesting the Vietnam War. They're protesting for Black liberation, and this freaked people out. And so, Ronald Reagan as governor even said something like, "We're gonna, if they're paying tuition, and also, of course, if they are paying debt through debt, they will think twice before enrolling to carry a picket sign, right? So there's always been this element of debt, of charging for education as a means of social control. What I worry about, and why I would be empathetic to this hypothetical Trump person, is that I don't have a PhD, you know, and I don't think everybody should have to go to college to live a good life. And I don't think you have to go to college to be smart or even educated. And you definitely shouldn't have to go to college to be able to make a living wage. And this is why it's so maddening that, you know, we can't just be like, yes, we think college should be available for everybody who wants to go. College for all who want to go as a public good at any stage of their life, and a federal jobs guarantee, unions, labor protections, well-paying work and social services, right? We have to be able to sort of walk and chew gum, think these things together. What, you know, the Democrats, there has been an elitist Republican, you know, mainly right-wing hostility to education, you know, but liberals and neoliberals and, you know, the Democratic Party has aided and abetted that project by saying, well, instead of, you know, doing sort of redistribution on the directly, for example, like a federal jobs guarantee or raising the minimum wage to something livable, we're going to say you're going to use education as a path to economic mobility, right? You know, so we're going to do education policy instead of economic policy. And you said that at the beginning, right? You said, I had no choice, but I did what I was told to do. I went to college, took on debt, and the social contract said, well, now you're supposed to be able to live and be okay. And that contract is totally freaking broken, right? And that's because that contract was always bullshit, right? I mean, education should be about, yes, on some level, professional training. We want to educate people so that they can be doctors and lawyers, but it should also be about educating people so they could be general practitioners or doctors in rural areas and public defenders, not just corporate lawyers, because they have to pay off their $500,000 of debt, or, you know, so that they can afford to be teachers or therapists, or that they can, or people can explore their interests and become sort of well-rounded people. And so I think a lot of this animosity that you're getting at, a lot of the skepticism of higher education, some of it's unfair and generated from the top, right? So it's like, you know, figures like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and the right wing before them, you know, blaming cultural elite, those professors, instead of wanting to blame corporate elite, right? So deflecting, just like they deflect and they blame immigrants for taking your jobs instead of blaming your boss. But academia has been elitist. And so when I'm in movements in coalition with academic faculty and staff, I'm always saying to them, this can't just be a fight about your academic freedom. This can't just be a fight about your job security as a special professor. This has to be about job security across the board for everybody, from the custodians at your campus to the grad students to people who are not academics. And this has to be about fighting for the right for everyone to have access to education as a public good, right? So that elitism that people are, I think, picking up on, it's not just in their imaginations, and we won't break it by just kind of fact checking folks, right? We have to offer a vision of a better future where they don't feel condescended to and their dreams aren't squelched, right? So I don't know. I guess I'd hope I'd have like an hour with that person, because I think it's complicated, you know, and people, like so many things on the right, like they're actually taking real grievances and twisting them around, and we can't sweep those grievances away.
Yeah, I think you can't count on this Democratic Party, the party that it has been, to counter this narrative, because it offends them. Because at the end of the day, they are elite. They do see the educated as better than someone who grew up working class. And I mean, I know this because I've worked in the Democratic Party and interacted with these people, right? So what do you think, like, needs to change? Do you see a path for change when you talk to people about student loan debt and how it's sort of central as an issue in politics today? You know, where do you see like fractures or places where you can inject hope and like, hey, maybe we should move towards this way of thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason I organize with the Debt Collective, we have big ambitions and big visions about what a better future would be like. But I think, you know, you organize around material issues. And so, you know, I was never going to have the kind of job where I could, I mean, we've got 10% unionization in this country. It's like, I knew I wasn't going to have the opportunity. I wasn't the type of person who was going to get a job where I was going to join a labor union where I'd have that chance. But I'm still in the economy. I'm still need to have some kind of material solidarity. And for me, the thinking is that your student loans, once you start getting over the shame of them, you realize, gosh, I have them because there isn't public education. Oh, this medical debt I can't pay that I put on my credit card. That's because there isn't healthcare as a public good. And so it is a way of organizing folks around material interests to also see what the state, what they should be entitled to in a decent society. So I think when you talk on that economic level with folks, you can short circuit some stuff, right? And so this is why, contrary to what the Matt Iglesias of the world would have you believe, like student debt cancellation was popular. I mean, there were all of these, there was like some amazing, mainstream media news stories where they'd be like, we're at a farmer's market in rural Pennsylvania. We're going to find, Republicans who hate the idea of debt cancellation. And they'd go and they'd interview people and they'd be like, yeah, well, I'm against welfare, but my kid has way too much student debt and college is way too expensive. So I'm for it, right? I mean, it was popular among independents. It was pretty popular among Republicans. It was really popular with Democrats. And so, I think it is the elitism that you mentioned that's kind of causing some of the Democratic Party establishment to just not grasp for reality. And they're so Ivy League brain dead that they think the world is Harvard when, like, most people go to public schools, most people go to community colleges, and tons of freaking people go to for-profit predatory colleges, like huge numbers. And so they don't see, when they think college, they think, oh, fancy people like me, and that's not reality. And that's also not what college could be or should be. So I think, I think Bernie has it right when he's talking about college for all, and he's got, and there are a growing number of people behind that vision. Unfortunately, even Randy Weingarten, who's the president of AFT, American Federation of Teachers, just wrote an op-ed saying, kind of trying to find some middle ground with Trumpism, saying we should give up on the vision of college for all and do some vocational job training. And to me, that just cedes way too much ground to this like class sorting, right? Like, okay, vocational training for the poor folks, working class folks, and the wealthy folks will get to go to, the private schools that manage to not lose their endowments. And I refuse to settle for that. And I don't think that speaks to people. I don't think that's inspiring. I think people, one of the most exciting things about organizing with the Debt Collective has been organizing with folks who were defrauded by predatory for-profit vocational school. And we've fought and we've won billions and billions and billions of dollars of debt relief for them. But we've also, at the end, they're also like, yeah, I should have had the right to study. Like, not just go to a career training school. Like, I should have had the right to, like, learn the way I've learned in this movement, And that's the kind of entitlement, I think, that I want to cultivate, and that, our movement is dedicated to cultivating. And I honestly think, it's inspiring. It's inspiring to have a big idea of something being a right. And then we know also from history that once something is established in a society as a right, it's harder to unravel it. And so I think it would be harder to chip away at free public education, in contrast to the attacks we're seeing right now on our sort of very fragmented educational system, and the way they're sort of picking off schools one by one so effectively. If we had a totally different model.
Yeah, it's like the same family can produce kids and one wants to go on and work on a farm and, grow food. And another could want to go to school for many, many years and become a doctor. And like, sure, one person heals the sick and the other one literally grows the food that keeps us all alive. But in society, the person who maybe goes to vocational school for agriculture and then goes on to do that is treated very differently and in a different class than the one who goes on to study to become a doctor. And I think, the Democrats, the educated elites maybe like that they're special, like that they're in that class, and that's why they're so resistant to this kind of alternative. But I think most people's views tend towards yours and mine and are pulled in different ways because these aren't represented in media so much. So I really appreciate the work that the Debt Collective has done, because so much of what you all have put out has changed that. So what are you working on now? Where should people follow you all, Astra?
Yeah, I mean, they should join us at debtcollective.org, follow our social media where we try to break things down and also give some practical advice, because there's going to be a lot of pain in the coming months. There's a tremendous amount of fear as student loan payments balloon, and that's the reality. I think it's really important that people not suffer in silence. One of the biggest tools, our enemies have is just the shame and the stigma that you being poor, being in debt carries in our society. So, I think it's really important for people to come together and for us to make clear that there is a constituency for this agenda that says, we shouldn't have to pit, these blue collar jobs against higher education, right? I mean, if we can create a vision of public education as a good that's truly accessible, that's free, that's democratic, available to working class people in this country, and also, work for a labor market seems too reductive, but like labor protections and jobs and careers that are actually dignified. And the fact that the right is dominating this conversation right now is a total travesty. So I really invite people to join us. We try our best to kind of, again, combine sort of practical advice with a prophetic, inspiring, forward-looking vision. And I think part of being an organizer is just constantly having that willful optimism, right? Like, I think this is actually a moment where the conversation about student debt and higher education is in such shambles that we can actually reframe the debate, and with some I wouldn't say luck, but with some tenacity and some strategy, we could actually wind up in a place that's better than where we were.
Yeah, really well said. Really appreciate you coming on and breaking this down. I definitely don't think it'll be the last time you'll be on the Jess and John pod, but it was the first, and we really appreciate you coming.
Thanks so much for having me.